Hi, everyone. My name is Reza Rahmani. Thanks, Winston, for the introduction. I grew up in Tehran, Iran. I moved here when I was 14 with my family. My story, as Winston mentioned, is my journey grappling with some of the darker emotions, such as anger, sadness, despair, how I came around to understand it better and express it in sort of healthier ways. The reason why I'm up here today sharing this is to grow myself as an inspirational leader who I want to be, and hopefully be able to help someone else out in the audience who might be experiencing something similar as I did. So I grew up in a home environment that did not feel safe as a child. My dad had a lot of rage inside of him. He had explosive anger. And as a child, you never knew when dad could get angry and he would just snap at you. So I had to always kind of watch out. It was like walking on eggshells, feeling the environment out and watching out so dad doesn't, you're not the victim when dad is having one of those angry moments. I remember I was around 5 years old. It was a winter evening. And it was around sunset. Mom was cooking my favorite dish, which is an eggplant stew. In Iran, we call it qaime badem jun. And dad was just coming home from work. I was in my room playing, waiting for dinner to be ready so I can come down and eat. And then I heard this kind of quarrel going back and forth between mom and dad. And over a course of a couple of minutes, it started to get heated, and they started yelling and screaming at each other. Mom wanted to register us for some swimming classes, and dad was completely against it. He was like, "Oh, you're on a mission to burn all my money. What the hell is this about? We didn't grow up with any swimming classes." And they went back and forth, and it felt like hours just screaming at each other. I was in my room, hearing what was going on, just waiting for their fight to end. And money was always a big issue in our house. It was a lot of the fights were over money. Finally, what felt like hours of this quarrel, finally it quieted down, and I came outside. I remember I summed up all the courage I had inside of me. And at that point, dad was sort of sitting in his blue chair in the corner of the living room, reading the paper. And I went up to dad, wanting to resolve this situation. And I said, Dad, I have an idea. You know how you guys have been fighting so much over money? I have a solution. Why don't you sell that parcel of land that you have outside of Tehran, and that will pay for all of these issues that you have with money. That will be way more than enough, and we can be happy. I remember dad just sort of sitting, hunching over on his seat and reading the paper with his glasses. He kind of lowered the paper down, looked up at me, and his face just got redder and redder, and his eyebrows came down, crunched up. He started yelling at me and said, "Who the hell do you think you are, you stupid kid? Telling me how to handle my money? Get the hell out of my face before I hit you so hard you can't breathe anymore." And I was just over here, I felt like just melted, like I wanted to crawl into a little ball and just go onto the floor. I felt so afraid, so worthless. I ran into my room, and I remember I just cried my eyes out for hours on end. That day, I made a decision. I made a decision that never ever again will I be angry. Never ever again will I express my anger to hurt someone like Dad did. So I went on the rest of my childhood and adolescent life trying not to be that. Because in my mind, anger was a destructive emotion. It was unwanted. So I took on this role of being the peacemaker in the family. I had this mask, always wearing this smile on my face, this happy kid that nothing ever got to him. Everything was cool. And deep inside, there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of turmoil going on. But I was too afraid to even get in touch with it because I didn't know what the consequences could be. I was afraid that it might take me over and I would become like that. So I had to develop some coping mechanisms to deal with all of this strong, powerful emotions that were brewing inside of me. So I went through life as a kid playing lots of video games as a way to distract myself, binge eating, as we were talking about, a way again to fill me up, eating my emotions. Later on, when I discovered women, watching a lot of porn, that was my way to sort of disconnect and just sort of not notice what's going on in reality, having sex with random women and trying to get my hit of dopamine, and on and on. And I remember I developed this sort of passive-aggressive behavior that I would just smile and say, oh yeah, it's no problem, like, beautiful idea. And then behind someone's back, be like, oh, that was a fucking stupid idea. Like, who thought of that? So as a result, my relationships were always surface deep because I wasn't being real with other people. I wasn't fully showing up and telling them how I really felt. And physically, what was going on with me by doing all of this coping was I was feeling exhausted all the time. It takes a lot of energy to manage your emotional state that way and not be able to, there's all this bottled up emotions inside. I felt exhausted. I had a lot of neck pain, shoulder, back pain. I would come home after a day's worth of work, and I would feel like I ran a marathon. Be like, I just sat on my desk all day, and I talked to maybe a bunch of people. What's going on? I was still kind of carrying life. Life was okay, but it wasn't great until about 3-4 years ago when I lost a really close friend of mine, and I was at the funeral. They were putting the body in the casket. They were lowering it down onto the ground. I found everybody around me was bawling their eyes out. They were weeping. It was a very grieving environment. And here I was, just completely numb. There was nothing happening, just checked out. That was a moment I knew there was something going on that wasn't right. That was, again, another turning point for me. I knew that this is not healthy. Like when someone who's so dear to me, I've lost them and I don't feel anything around it, there's something going on that needs to be looked at. And it's interesting, they say, when the student is ready, the teacher shows up. So that was a point that I started looking into a lot of resources to help me understand what was going on with me. So I'll share with you some of the 2 or 3 resources, and there's obviously lots more. One, we talked about meditation today. That's been a big part of what's helped me. I attended a 10-day silent meditation, Vipassana. Some of you may know of the retreat centers in BC. There's lots of great meditation techniques out there. What meditation helped me was to really get in touch with what's going on inside. And from disconnecting to being present with who I really am. That takes a lot of practice, obviously, and I'm nowhere near perfect. This is the start of a journey. But through that, I think just kind of coming back home into my body, that was one of the first things that really helped me. Some of you guys may be familiar with the work of Bren Brown. Bren Brown is an author, speaker, who has done a lot of work on courage and vulnerability and shame. I attended a couple of her workshops, and what her work helped me understand was that I'm not alone. This is a very common human experience, and it takes courage to be vulnerable and speak to what's going on for us. Whereas before, I used to see it as weakness, not being able to show emotion. That helped me have a different perspective about feeling my emotions and see it more as courage. And another resource that helped me was nonviolent communication. So now that I understood, okay, what was going on, I needed a way to express it. My fear always was hurting others. And nonviolent communication gave me the language to be able to express it in a way that's not hurtful to other people, that I can tie it to my needs, what's going on for me when I'm feeling angry or sad, without blaming or pointing fingers at someone else. And finally, another resource that helped me was finding safe spaces where I could express myself without any big consequences. Because in the beginning, it's all messy. Like, you have to find the words, it feels too much. So I joined a men's team for over 5 years. It was a safe circle. Once a week, we met for 3 hours. I could act out something I wanted to do, say the words, whatever, swear. And nobody took it personally. It was just a safe space that we could be with each other, and I didn't have to take it at home to someone else. So all of those things, and again, this is work in progress, but it helped me put on the right path to at least try and understand what was going on, heal some of the trauma that was inside of me from childhood. So it's really important for you to know that if you are experiencing something similar, this work is so worth it to do, not just for us, but for everyone else that's in relationship with us, because we have a lot of impact. And even for past generations, if you have children, if this trauma is not healed, we pass it on to other people. Secondly, that it is hard work, but it's worth it. So be patient with yourself and have self-compassion. Ask for help. I'm here if you want to speak to me later, and I'll be more than happy to share some of the other resources with you. Thanks very much.